let's go ahead and get started. And I put lots of thought in today to this, and that's not a pun because it's really on thinking and mindset. So I want to talk through this. I want to talk about the intersection between your health and your mindset and talk about how you can forecast future successes. And before I kind of launch into my summary, I want to offer a disclaimer because I'm not a psychotherapist. And so sometimes when you start talking about some of these deep thinking concepts, I don't want to oversell my experience or knowledge base in this area. I'm not an expert in thinking distortions or mindfulness, but I have had some experience with this. Years ago, I was the director of a psychiatric hospital. I served as that director for 5 years. And then when I left and started my own primary care practice, so much of my primary care practice was dealing with mental health challenges. So I opened a mental health practice called Physicians Mental Health Services. That practice is open today, it's current today, and I still oversee the provision of care through therapy and primary care. So I'm speaking as one who has had a lot of experience in this space, but I myself am not a psychotherapist. So my goal today is just kind of point out and acknowledge the power of mindfulness and how that in many ways is a contributor to our long-term success. And I want to start by sharing two experiences. I'm down in Utah visiting my parents, and my kids came down to compete in a dance competition. It's the largest dance competition in the country, held in Farmington at Lagoon. And this is my 23-year-old daughter. Her name is Mallory. And I thought of Mallory as I was preparing this presentation because Mallory will frequently come home and she'll make these comments like, "Dad, I'm manifesting to the world that this is going to happen to me." And she says that a lot. I'm manifesting this, I'm manifesting that. And so that has been on my mind. And when I looked up the definition of manifesting, I thought I knew what that meant. And I was close, but it was fun to find the definition. And that's basically an individual who can change their physical reality through some of the power of their thoughts and feelings of actions. And it kind of addresses this law of attraction that we attract what we want. We attract what we're thinking about and talking about and doing. And my daughter is very positive. She's a hard worker. And so naturally, she attracts good things. They come to her. This is my 14-year-old daughter. Her name is Alexis. And I had a little bit different experience with Alexis. She is a very talented soccer player. She plays on a competitive travel team and recently sustained a concussion, and she's been out of play for 4 weeks. And I'm a guy who that's what I do for a living. I do neurological health. I have had hundreds of hours of continuing education in the diagnosis and management of post-concussive syndrome. So I feel very competent and I feel good at that. But knowing and doing something are not the same thing. So here's my daughter who's struggling with a concussion, and I know what to do, but sometimes I can't get her to do it. And the reason I can't get her to do it is she has a headache, or she's tired, or the very moment I start doing something, she says, "I can't do that. It makes me feel dizzy. I got to sit down." One time while pressing her to do certain things, she started getting dry heaving and almost so nauseated from this dizziness, this vertigo. And I realized, wow, beyond just having a positive attitude, a person has to be willing to push through these plateaus, that we're going to experience really difficult times through our treatment and our recovery. And we've got to find the plateaus to be able to break through those. And one way we do that is through being mindful. And so as I was preparing my lecture this week, I was looking for different definitions and experts in mindfulness. What do they talk about? And there's a lot of kind of foo-foo, woo-woo thinking, and I don't say that in a negative way, but there's a lot of mind space in this concept of being mindful. And the definition of mindfulness is really about paying attention to the present moment. And you do it purposefully and you do it without judgment. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I'm having a bad day, I don't want to say, oh, my day sucks, and it shouldn't because I have everything I need, because that's being aware of the moment. But now I'm kind of judgmental. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. This is so stupid. I shouldn't feel this way. But mindfulness is about noticing your thoughts and feelings and your body sensations and the world that surrounds you, but not getting carried away and wishing that it was totally different than what it is, right? Being mindful is just being aware. And so I want to talk about what that means. Being mindful doesn't mean that you have to put on your Lululemon stretchy pants and sit in the pose that you see right there, this mindful meditation pose, and just sit and think. I can be very mindful in a very busy space just by being aware. And so you would say, what am I thinking about? What thoughts keep going through my mind? Why am I having these thoughts? The next one would be, what am I noticing around me? What are the sounds? What's my breathing? What's the environment? Now, why would we do this? And it's because we live in such a chaotic world with so many things thrown at us in so many locations and time frames, that just taking a break from the busyness and just being aware of what's going on in your mind, in your body. What emotions am I feeling right now? Can I name the emotion without saying, well, that's stupid. I don't know why I'm feeling that way. This morning, when we got up to go to the dance competition, my daughter was just fine all morning long. And when we get ready to go in the car, all of a sudden she feels sick to her stomach and nauseated. And there was this moment where I looked at her and I said, Lexi, why don't you just acknowledge you're feeling a little anxious about the dance competition? And she says, I'm not being anxious. I have a stomach ache. And I said, okay, well, whatever. Think about that. I suspect that's a little bit of anxiety. And then she was able to open up and we kind of talked through. It was just anxious. She didn't have a stomach ache. It wasn't that she ate bad food. Okay. How does the moment feel right now? I'm only observing it. I'm not trying to change it. I'm not trying to manipulate the situation. I just want to be aware of it. I want to talk about it. I want to acknowledge what's happening. What are the circumstances that are making me to feel this way? What's that general awareness? That's what being mindful means, right? We're not trying to change the situation. We're not trying to fix it. If you're married to a guy, and gals are my wife is very good at just being mindful. And oftentimes she'll tell me, and I want to fix it, right? I'll say, I'm geared towards, I'm going to fix it. And my wife will say, don't fix it, Randy. Just talk with me about this for a few minutes. Just kind of be with me and talk through this. And I have to think, okay, I got to be better at that. I got to be better at helping her to be mindful and just being present and not allowing my mind to wander off in what I'm worried about. One of the individuals that talks a lot about this, her name is Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck has a PhD in psychology, and she's written a really nice book called The Mindset, which is kind of the psychology of success. And she uses two examples that help people like you and I recognize, what is our mindset like? Do we have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? And I'm going to spend some time developing these thoughts. A growth mindset is a mindset that's willing to accept the moment as it is and then be open about where that's coming from and how we can fix it, or how we can modify it, how we can work through it. See, I quickly went to fix it. A fixed mindset is kind of this fixed notion that things are the way they are, and I have very limited ability to change that. And it's all or nothing. It's black or white. I'm good or I'm not good, right? And so we're going to talk for a few minutes more about this. And I created this chart based on the research of Dr. Carol Dweck. And it's interesting how she talks about mindset. She categorizes them by things on the left-hand side of your screen. So it's things like your beliefs or your challenges or what type of effort that you might be making along the way. Your setbacks. How do you look at a setback or a failure, if you will? How do you accept criticism? How do you accept the success of others, and what's your learning style? So I want to talk about these for just a few minutes and give some examples. Someone with a growth mindset has a belief system that intelligence and abilities can be developed through effort and dedication, and that life experience creates those beliefs. But a fixed mindset says, well, my intelligence and my abilities are static. They are what they are. These are what I was born with. It's in my DNA. It's fixed and it's unchangeable, and I'm stuck where I'm at. When it comes to how we embrace challenges, a growth mindset would embrace the challenge as an opportunity for growth. I'm going to intellectually stretch myself. What am I to learn from this experience? Whereas a fixed mindset would totally avoid challenges because there's a fear of failure. Like, I'm not good with change. I don't want to deal with change. And every time that I'm faced with a new challenge, it increases my exposure and my risk that I'm going to fail at this typical opportunity. A growth mindset looks at effort very different from a fixed mindset. So a growth mindset says that my effort is very essential for me to find success. I have to put forth effort if I want to master a new skill or ability. But a fixed mindset says effort's too painful. It's actually unnecessary because I can't really change anything. And if I have to put forth a lot of effort, it's kind of a sign that I don't have the talent, that I don't have the ability to get through the situation that I am in. So a fixed mindset is not talents based. It's just fixed on who you are. Well, what if you experience a setback? A growth mindset would say that setbacks or failures are kind of learning opportunities. I've got to develop some resilience. I recognize that the first time I try something, I may not be very good at it. It doesn't mean that I can't be good at it. It doesn't mean that I'm incapable or don't have the tools. It's just a momentary plateau. But a fixed mindset would say that setbacks and failures are evidence that I am limited, that I can't do those things. I just give up easy. If I have a setback, it just is a reminder that I don't have the tools in my toolbox to get achievement out of whatever challenge I'm in. People with a growth mindset are a little bit more open to criticism. They receive feedback that gives them an opportunity to grow. They're not a know-it-all. But a fixed mindset takes criticism very personally. We're threatened by it. We don't like it. It feels uncomfortable. And then that person's just mean-spirited or angry or ornery. And we take things, we create vendettas and vengeance when it comes to criticism. From a success, a growth mindset finds inspiration and motivation in other people's successes. They're excited when they see other people achieve great things. This last month, my brother-in-law ran an Ironman in Houston. And I was so excited about that. Like, he gave me his Ironman tracking tool, and I could log on during the course of the day Saturday and see when he finished the swim and how long his transition was and see how he finished the race. I thought it was so cool, and I could not wait to express excitement about the fact that he's now an Ironman. He did that. It's amazing. A fixed mindset would go back and say, well, if other people are successful, they're just going to walk all over me. Evidence of other people's success is a reflection that I'm inadequate and I can't do those types of things. You see the difference in these. And then the last one, a growth mindset, when it comes to learning, they're always open. They have a strong desire to learn and to grow because improvement is far more important than capability. But a fixed mindset would say, well, I'm not really that interested in learning. It's difficult. It's challenging. It reminds me of all my limitations, and I look uneducated or I look uninformed. I had a manager once in my urgent care that was completely overwhelmed in her duties and responsibilities. And I sat down with her and I said, you need to delegate. Let's delegate this task to Lainey, and let's delegate this task to Sarah. And we were talking about how to lighten her load. And as we did that, she came back to me and she says, Randy, I'm kind of worried because if you give those tasks to those individuals, you might not need me anymore. And so she had a very fixed mindset. She recognized that she couldn't do everything that needed to be done. But if she gave it to others, it might make her look bad and it would make them look good. So then I would let her go. This lady was my manager for almost 20 years. There was never me looking beyond her. And I quickly learned, oh, she had such a fixed mindset. She couldn't see other people succeeding was acknowledgement that she too was succeeding. Very much a fixed mindset. So I'm sharing this with you, and as I've gone through this, I'm asking you to do a self-assessment. I actually found Carol Dweck had a self-assessment, and I'll post it after this summary because I would love for you to go in and do a self-assessment and ask yourself this question: am I more of a growth mindset, or am I just kind of fixed? I have a hard time moving on from this. So when it comes to the things that we do at A Mind for All Seasons or the Enhanced Protocol, I want you to ask yourself, do you view the symptoms that brought you here as kind of these symptoms that are concrete and defined and unchangeable? Many people come because they say, well, my mom has dementia, my husband has dementia, my loved one has dementia, or I think I'm getting dementia. And even though we may not be able to reverse that to a kind of a pre-disease state, there's an opportunity to make people better. There's an opportunity to make that adjustment. And I think that sometimes if we're all or nothing in a fixed mindset, we miss those opportunities to find subtle improvements. Do you have thoughts or beliefs that you're never going to get better? I watched my daughter do this when she got a concussion, right? She's almost 15 years old. She had to miss 4 or 5 soccer games. And I saw the distress in her eyes when we go to a game. She's like, Dad, it's never going to come back. These girls are going to move ahead of me. I'm going to lose skill set and they're going to get better. And oh my gosh, is this going to limit my opportunity to play in college? And I was like, oh my goodness. I watched this anxiety go from 0 to hero in no time flat. Do you ever wonder if all of your symptoms are permanent? Because if you feel that way, there's a little bit more of a fixed mindset that we have to work through. I come from the perspective that no symptom is ever permanent. I always think we can make a difference and try to get better. We just can't lose the faith and the attempts to try new approaches. Is there a chance that you might find some improvement? Because I linger on this forever. I recently precepted a graduate student. She was getting her doctorate, and I was one of her preceptor. And when she started the service with me, she says, I was kind of nervous to come and work with you because my preceptor told me you're crazy. And I looked at her and I said, wow, what an introduction to our first day. And she's, no, I don't think you're crazy. I really like what you do. But my preceptor says, no, he's crazy. He thinks you can actually make a difference in people with dementia. And so be careful, because when you go, he's not practicing evidence-based medicine. And boy, that lit me on fire, because I thought, wow, I actually work really hard to practice evidence-based medicine. Maybe I need to share the evidence with her, because she has a very fixed mindset that nothing can be done to make people's lives better. Ask yourself if you're willing to embrace things or try new interventions that previously you were hesitant about, or they may have been unexplored, or you tried them in the past and it didn't work out. We have a client at A Mind for All Seasons where I was talking about doing hormone replacement with a family member, and this individual said, you know what, we've done that, but I'm willing to look at it again. I'm willing to try and see what we notice from that intervention. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful mindset. This is a growth mindset, willing to recognize that a different perspective may mean there's a different outcome. Have you ever considered that the enhanced protocol isn't just a protocol? It's really a learning process rather than just a 3-month quote unquote program that you do. And I've lectured about this. I want to talk about this. I developed the enhanced protocol. This is kind of my baby. This is where I've spent 10 years of my life trying to identify what's the process we would take someone through to help them get better. And sometimes I think I misnamed it. I should actually call it the enhanced process, because the enhanced process is we start looking at what's the neurological symptoms that has brought an individual to the table in the first place. And then we should do some baseline testing. We ought to actually screen the brain. Let's do cognitive testing through central nervous system vital signs or through Brain HQ or through a MOCA test. Let's establish a baseline against which we can measure process improvement over time. Let's do a bunch of in-depth laboratory assessment and start guiding people on lifestyle changes that can make a difference. I love that we have different dogmas that come to the table. Some of you on this call have lived a vegetarian lifestyle. Some of you have lived a carnivore lifestyle. Those are vastly different from one another. But there's an open-mindedness that says, hey, there's a lot of good things that come from fruits and vegetables. And there's also a lot of good things that come from maybe taking a break from those as you would do in a carnivore diet. There's no fixed presentation that I adopt 100%. I think it has to very much be individualized, and lifestyle guidance falls into that category. It wouldn't make sense if I told everyone you have to go on a walk every day, and then I'm talking to someone who has a terrible knee and they can't walk, or I'm talking to someone who's an amputee, and when they put their prosthesis on, they go on a walk, it rubs a wound into their stump. I have to be thoughtful about what would work. So it's very much a step-by-step process, guides. And I don't pretend to be the expert in this. I'm constantly getting better at this because every time I work with somebody, they teach me a little bit more about how we can apply this process to them. It really is the enhanced process. We have tried to give all of you opportunities to come to office hours and ask questions. And I view that almost like a support group, that you can come to the table and ask a question and other people hear that interaction and that dialogue. And then they say, oh my gosh, that really helped me. That answered my question. Thank you for asking that. I've had it so many times people say, I actually had that question, but you answered it earlier from somebody else. And I think office hours is such a beautiful thing. And then the point of these master classes is let's dig a little bit deeper on one particular topic. And let's see if by digging deeper, if we can open some insight or expand the thinking on a given topic beyond maybe what we appreciated previously. So let me give you some ideas about how to ask yourself this question. I'm going to revisit, do I have a growth mindset? When you talk to yourself, what kind of language do you use, right? Ask yourself that question. Are you hard on yourself? Are you critical? Do you talk like a taskmaster? Do you cuss yourself out? Do you use bad language? Does it make you feel depressed? Because are you more in this fixed and concrete mindset, or are you a little bit more flexible? Do you tell yourself, hey, I might be able to do this. I didn't do very well yesterday, but I'm going to keep trying. So a growth mindset would suggest that you can learn new information. You can adapt to new challenges. You can be an active participant in your own progress towards better brain health. And this is actually, I can visit with someone for 30 or 40 minutes and get a very good impression if someone has a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, because they'll often say, they'll respond to me in ways like this. I've already tried that. I already did this. I already did that. Well, my doctor says that's stupid. My doctor said that wouldn't apply. My insurance won't pay for that. And all of these are opportunities to shut down the discussion and say, that won't work for me. And I'm one that will constantly push people beyond their comfort zone and say, well, maybe it didn't work in the past. I wonder why. I wonder if we could try this. So the place that I see this a lot is in head injuries. If someone goes and gets ocular and vestibular therapy, they'll achieve a certain level of improvement. And if we don't work on their neck or on their mindset, oftentimes those problems come back. And so when I say to them, hey, maybe we should do some vestibular ocular therapy, they'll say, I already did that. It didn't work for me. And my response is, the order of operations actually matters. Like sometimes we have to fix one problem before we move into the next problem. Otherwise, we just don't get things to stick. Well, how do you find the balance between stretching yourself a nut and yet stretching yourself too thin? When is enough enough? How do you know that you're being just stretched too much? And the way you identify this is by taking a self-assessment of your mindset. What keeps you from stretching? Is it fear? Do you have a lot of hesitation and you feel stress about that? Is it hesitation generally? Like, no, I don't like new settings. It'll make me feel uncomfortable. What if I fail? Right? These things will keep you from stretching. I'm fully aware that sometimes it's finances. Like, I recognize that what we do is a cash pay service. And for some people, that's really uncomfortable. They just have a finite amount of finances. Well, I try to be very open and say, hey, listen, if you'll just be open with me, I'll work with you to find the least expensive way to approach a topic or an intervention. And sometimes it's just a lack of effort. People will say, Randy, I'm freaking exhausted. Like, I can't keep doing this. I'm just totally worn out. I understand that. And so a growth mindset would say, I'm worn out today. I can't do any more today. Let's revisit this tomorrow or next week. Because sometimes we've had a bad night's sleep. Sometimes we get sick to our stomach. Sometimes we're all stressed out. Sometimes our kids call us with a bad experience, and that wears us out. In those instances, let it go for that day and let's go back to the drawing board tomorrow. That doesn't have to define us for the rest of our lives. A fixed mindset would say, I can't do that. It's just too difficult. But a growth mindset would say, hey, let's take a break today. Let's revisit this tomorrow. I want to see if I feel a little bit better tomorrow. A fixed mindset will say, well, this is the way I've always done things. I'm going to kind of keep doing this the same way. A growth mindset would say, hey, I know that I've done it this way because that's what I've been most comfortable with, but maybe there's a better way to do this. This is me to a T in technology. I've always used PowerPoint presentations, and one of my buddies says, Randy, you should start using Canva. And I said, I don't want to learn a new program. I've always prepared these presentations using PowerPoint. And he's like, if you just took a minute to learn Canva, it might open your mind. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have a fixed mindset. I need to tone that back a little bit. There might be a better way for me to produce presentations. A fixed mindset would say, I'm not going to do that. It's just too difficult. But a growth mindset would say, hey, I'm going to give that some try, even though it's a little uncomfortable to me. I'm going to make an effort to do that. There is a direct mind-body connection. And we know the mind-body connection plays a very essential role in helping us find healing and recovery from illnesses or injuries or so forth. And so there's this interconnectedness between our thoughts and our emotions and our behaviors that actually have a very direct impact on healing. I remember when I was in graduate school and I was learning about this psychology, and one person was a therapist, and they talked about this therapeutic method of just being with someone, connecting, but not even saying anything. And they would bring in people who had terrible PTSD and terrible anxiety. And they would come into the room and the therapist would recognize they're not in a good spot and they're not going to talk. And the therapist would say, hey, I'm so glad you're here today. Thanks for making the effort to come. You don't have to talk if you're not comfortable. I'm just going to sit here and do some computer work and support you and whatever you need. And they would spend an entire hour together and not even say anything. And at the end, the therapist would say, hey, I'm going to get a drink. Would you like a drink of water? And the individual would say, sure. Give them a drink of water, and they'd say, hey, that's all of our time today. I really appreciated being with you today. I know it is so scary to come here and visit with me, and I'm just a part of your team. So when you're ready to talk, we'll talk. But until then, thanks for just making an effort to come. And the person would leave, and there's no therapy. And I'm thinking, that's crazy. And then I realized that's actually probably the most therapeutic thing that psychologist could do, is just be there with them, not force anything, not force them to talk about it. And then the person would come back the next week and they'd spend 45 minutes in silence. And then the therapist would say, do you want a glass of water? Do you want anything? How was your week? And then the person would talk for just a minute. So they're kind of dipping their toe in the water. And they talked about how these therapy sessions would go on. And eventually the individual was willing to open up and talk because the legwork had been done to just be connected to the individual. Mental and emotional well-being really do influence healing and recovery. And you'll see the graphic on the right-hand side of your screen talks about the impact of the brain and the heart and the stomach and the intestines. In my pediatrics rotation, I learned that pediatric patients express stress through belly pain. And so it really clued me in that when I'd have a 9-year-old come to my office and they had belly pain, I should never just default to the fact that they're constipated or have diarrhea. I should default to the fact that they're scared to go to school, or maybe they're scared to take a test, or maybe something in their home isn't quite right, because they would always get bellyache, kind of like the butterflies, when emotionally they were not in a good spot. So this is how I would define this thinking and this behavior connection. You see the thinker there, this beautiful statue that has gone through all of history. The way that we think actually is a large predictor of what type of action that we'll take on something. And that action then produces a life experience. And that life experience becomes the framework between how we deal with stress or how we feel pain, how well we recover from complex situations, and whether or not we find improvement. Then our life experience establishes beliefs. I'm sitting with my mom today, and I remember my mom saying things like, be careful about the habits that you form, because then first you'll form habits, and then your habits are going to form you. That belief system makes a difference. So you got to ask yourself, did you establish a belief system that it's safe to try new things? And some people get caught in a belief system where they get so depressed and so anxious that they start saying, what's the point? I don't see the point to all of this. There was one time my wife and I were engaged in a conversation, and my wife says, I'm done. I'm done with this. And when the emotion of the moment settled down, I said, hey, listen, I'm okay with all the hard discussion we've had, but what I'm not okay with is when you say I'm done. Like, I don't like that, because when you're done, it basically what it's saying is there's nowhere else we can go to solve this problem. And I said, so help me out when we're in a tough spot and we're working through something. Please don't use the term I'm done, because that would imply there's nothing left to give. And I think there's always something more to give. And my wife, she appreciated that. She said, hey, thank you. I'm going to wipe that from my vocabulary. You're not going to hear me say that again. And that was helpful as we solved through problems. And so what's the point? Or what if I get hurt? And what if I get sick? And where's the stress? These are things we just have to be aware of, because they play a role in our long-term ability to find good physical, mental, and brain health, or cognitive health, okay? So along this line, Carol Dweck says, what are your automatic thoughts? When you're faced with something, what's the automatic rumination that comes into your mind that you think of over and over and over? Because those automatic thoughts oftentimes come from thinking distortions. I'm going to talk about thinking distortions as my way to kind of finish this. And I'm going to give you examples. Have you ever experienced a thinking distortion that's all or nothing? It's black or white. It has to be this way or that way. There's no in between. And I started thinking, what are examples that I've experienced over time? For 10 years, I owned a weight loss company, and I help people through weight loss. And you can't believe how many times I would ask people, how did you do the last couple of weeks? And they'd say, terrible. I did so terrible. And I'd say, well, tell me why you did so terrible. Well, I woke up every day and I had a good breakfast after I exercised, and I tried to get the adequate amount of proteins, and I worked on my macros, and I did great. I actually did pretty good for a week. And then on the weekend, I had a slice of pizza. I can't believe I blew it. I'm so ticked off at myself. And I would think, oh my gosh, you're losing your mind because you ate a slice of pizza? And it's because they're so black and white in their thinking when it comes to weight loss that perfection gets in the way of just eating good. You don't have to be perfect when it comes to a good diet to have a good diet. You can have a slice of pizza. You can have a piece of candy. It's not the end of the world. But black and white thinking is a cognitive distortion that makes a change. The next one is called disqualifying the positive. Okay? So many times, if we have a thinking distortion that's kind of based on depression or anxiety, we disqualify anything in our life that's positive. So for example, let's say that we go to church And someone comes up to us at church and says, I'm going to use my wife as an example, and not because she does this, just because she's a safe example. Someone says, "Oh, LaShare, that dress is so cute. You look so cute." And she'll say, "Thank you." And then she turns around to me and says, "They're just being nice. I don't think they really meant that. I look like a disaster today." Right? Fortunately, she doesn't do that. But that's what I mean by disqualifying the positive. This is what Carol Dweck has talked about, where if you walk around and good things are happening to you, but you're constantly shoving them off as that's not me. I don't deserve that positivity. I am kind of a loser, right? We don't want to disqualify the positive things that are happening in our lives. The next one is an overgeneralization. We have to be careful not to overgeneralize things. So this is common when I'm working with people that have migraines. And they'll often say, "I always get headaches. I'm going to be sick forever. My body just constantly lets me down. Like, as soon as when I need to perform, damn it, I just get this terrible headache." That's an overgeneralization. And that's a very much a thinking distortion. And it's a fixed mindset. It would be better to say, okay, I want to perform my best. And so I'm going to get some good rest. Tomorrow I have a presentation in a master class. I want to be good, so I'm going to try to get some good rest. And I'm going to start my morning with a short walk so I can get the blood flow going. And then I'm going to have a nice little breakfast and prepare. And when that headache comes on, I'll think to myself, okay, it's kind of early in this headache. I know that there's 2 or 3 things I can do to try to stave this off. I can have a little caffeine. Maybe I need some ibuprofen right now. Maybe I need to adjust my neck, right? I'm thinking through, how can I work through this instead of saying this overgeneralization? Well, my body just lets me down. I just always get these friggin' headaches and it's horrible. The next thinking distortion that is often very automatic in people is this mental filter where we dwell excessively on the negative and then we fail to see the positive. It's kind of similar to disqualifying the positive, but I think it goes beyond that. It's just re-emphasizing all of the rotten things that happen to us along the way. So yesterday, as I'm coming up here, I think, I'm so grateful that I'm traveling in Idaho when the sun is out and the roads are clear. Now, there was road construction and there were barriers and there were slowdowns and there was a little bit of traffic, but I constantly was telling myself on the way down here, I can deal with a little bit of this road construction and delay because I haven't seen the sun and the weather like this for a long time. I'm so grateful to have this beautiful weather. I worked on trying to adjust my mental filter as I was working through traffic and setbacks and delays and road construction. The next thinking distortion that often happens, according to Carol Dweck, is be careful not to catastrophize everything. So for example, let's say that I go exercise and I'm doing bench press and I feel a little bit of tenderness in my chest, right? As I'm flexing and pushing that way and I feel a little tenderness. And a catastrophizer would say, "Oh my gosh, I got to run to the ER. I've got a little bit of chest discomfort. It's probably going to die of a heart attack. I know someone who died of a heart attack. That's probably going to be me." That's catastrophizing. When I got home from work the other day, this was yesterday. My neighbor came over and says, "Hey, I need you to write an MRI for my husband. He ruptured the long head of his bicep and he's minimizing it, but he needs an MRI because what if he gets a disability? He's a physical therapist." And I stopped for a minute and I'm like, I think your husband would know if there's a problem, right? And I wrote the MRI without talking to the husband. Then the husband comes over to my house and says, "Hey, listen, I don't want to catastrophize this." That was his language. This is not the end of the world. This doesn't need to be surgerized. I don't think I need to rush into an MRI. And I instantly thought of this presentation. We can't catastrophize things. Okay. Oh, sorry, I stopped. Let me go back. The next one is mind reading. You want to be careful if you have this distortion that you think you can read other people's minds and you know exactly what they're thinking. I want to give you a couple of examples of this from from my own life experience. I had someone that came up to me the other day and said, "Are you mad at so and so?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not mad at them. Why would they think I'm mad at them?" "Well, they saw you at the grocery store and they waved to you, but you kind of frowned and gave them a crusty face and didn't really acknowledge them. You didn't really respond to them. And so they walked away and they said, 'I know that he doesn't like me. I always thought he didn't like me.'" And I thought, are you kidding me? That's what they're thinking? They think that I think they're stupid or that they annoy me? I said, "You realize that I have keratoconus. Keratoconus means that I am legally blind. I cannot see hardly anything without certain contact lenses in my eyes. And if I go somewhere with glasses or without those lenses because my eyes get tired, I can't see you. I can't even recognize you. So you could be standing across from me in the produce section and wave to me, and I can't even see you." And so this automatic thought that an individual had, they're reading my mind, they wave to me, and I either don't see them or don't appreciate them, or maybe my facial expression says they're reading my mind. He doesn't like me. He never likes me. He never responds to me. And if I was to be totally honest with you, I told my eye doctor at the last visit, "I need you to really help me work on my distant vision because I live in a small city and I've taken care of thousands of patients in this city, and I get really self-conscious when people from across the room wave to me and I cannot see them. I don't know who they are." And so for the last year, I've been working on changing one contact lens to have better vision distantly so this doesn't happen. I don't want people to think I dislike them. That's their thinking distortion, but I own part of that. I have to be careful. The next one is personalization. Okay. This is a thinking distortion, and I'll give you an example. A person that might start having cognitive decline will say, "I just didn't exercise enough. I spent my whole life being lazy and on the couch. I didn't exercise enough, so that's why I got dementia." Or, "I knew that I shouldn't have eaten what I ate over the years, and that's why I have this problem." Where they over personalize everything. Everything becomes personal about them. I have seen people who have done everything perfect and they still get sick. They don't have to personalize it. It's because we live in a mortal body. And our mortal body, the immune system gets flagged and turned on. It might not be anything that we did wrong. So we have to be careful not that this thinking distortion is we over personalize everything and that we have some flaw or some problem long term that minimizes us or diminishes us. So for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap up. I want to just hit some of these bullet points. Mindfulness is this practice of just being aware of your current state, your thoughts, your impressions, just being in the moment, just being aware of what's happening, right? Being aware of something gives you a lot of opportunity to deal with it. After a little bit of a self-assessment, ask yourself if you're more of a fixed mindset or more of a growth mindset. Are you willing to expand, try new things, learn from your experience, maybe feel a little bit self-conscious and embarrassed if things don't go perfect? Because if that becomes your mindset, you're going to do great. You'll work through this. We'll help you figure out how to expand your perceptions to get better and stronger. Identify any automatic thinking that you might have that could be a thinking distortion or that would self-sabotage you from having a better life experience in whatever situation that you're in. I didn't talk a lot about squared breathing today, but squared breathing is just this mindful practice where you slow down and you just think about taking a breath. Just let things go. Take a deep breath. Hold it for a second. Let it out. Hold it for a second. Just being mindful about your breathing helps your mind slow down and helps you think about things in a different way. Set some goals and intentions of how you can be better at this topic. No one's an expert. I have a client that lives in New York, and in a recent telemedicine consultation with him, I asked him about his daily routine because he's not moving very much. He's not exercising. And he acknowledged he'd like to, but he doesn't know how to fit it in. And so I said, well, walk me through your routine. And he says, well, I wake up in the morning and I go to prayer. And I go to the church where I go to prayer. He says he goes to synagogue. And then he goes to his work. And then at lunchtime, he runs over for a prayer meeting. And then he comes back to work. And then he goes back to prayer meeting in the evening. And I said, well, hold on a minute. You mean to tell me that you're going 3 times a day to prayer? And he says, yes, that's just how I was raised. I've always done that. It really helps me out. And I'm not there for very long. I'm just there for 10 or 15 minutes. Well, let me tell you what that did for me. It made me think, wow, what an impressive guy that he's so thoughtful. He always wants to be engaged in prayer with other of his friends and colleagues from his faith community. And I was nudging him to be a little bit more intentional about his physical activity. So we talked about how we could fit that in. But after I finished, I turned around and looked at my own daily routine and said, how could I be more like my client and be more thoughtful and prayerful throughout the day? What can I do different? And so I made some very intentional efforts to be more prayerful and more thoughtful during my day as a result of coaching with this client. Now, isn't that fascinating? He's paying me for coaching, and I feel like I owe him a debt of gratitude and money because he's actually helped change the way that I do my daily routine so that I can be more intentional and mindful and prayerful. Don't quit. Stay persistent. Go one day at a time. Don't have this perfectionistic attitude that if you had a slice of pizza that you've lost your soul or that you blew it and you can't get it back and your diet's toast. Don't have this thought that if you have a bad day or you missed an exercise routine or something didn't go the way you wanted, it's okay. You just be present in the moment. We move past that tomorrow. There's always tomorrow. We are all a big becoming in this life. We're getting better. We're trying to find how we make things better in our lives and other lives each day at a time.